I personally have been to audit all of our contract manufacturers to look at the controls they have around the manufacturing of our products, all the way from the quality inspection of components coming into the loading dock, to the storage of those components, to the process to check out components and put it on the manufacturing line.
SC Media and our sponsor, CISO Trust, are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Bryan Willett, CISO at Lexmark. Welcome, Bryan.
Hello. Glad to join.
So Bryan, before we get into our topic today, I'd like to find out what interested you in the cybersecurity field.
I saw it years ago as a customer need. My background is probably a little different than many other CISOs. I grew up in an R&D organization, and within that R&D organization, as everyone starting in their career, they're always trying to figure out their path forward and where they're going to go and excel the most in their career. And where I saw the opportunity for myself were gaps that we had within the business that needed to be filled. And one of those gaps happened to be in the embedded security space. And so I started down that path, and that just opened doors, right? It opened doors not only within the technical field, but also throughout the business, because quickly, right at the same time that I started to get into that space, customers started to care, and they started to ask questions, and they were asking difficult questions that the business couldn't answer, and that's where I played a big role to help them answer those questions and satisfy customer requirements.
So you were oriented around the business aspects of security. It sounds like from the beginning.
Yes, very much so. One of the biggest challenges that the development organization can have is line of sight to your customer, understanding what they're fighting through with, whether it be your products or their strategy, and that was something that I was always hyper focused on, is understanding that so that we can look internally at our own services and products we were offering and making sure that we're helping them, right? Creating a value add. And that's what really led to the business side of looking across the business and figuring out where we can help. Because in the end, it's about making revenue, right? And that's what covers our expense and cost.
I really like starting from that focus because, we in this industry, when you've been in it for a while, you can start to get lost in the maturity matrices and the controls and vulnerability scans and all of those things, which are important, but not really understanding, well, how does that relate to the products that we're building? Can be a big mistake.
It can. And losing that focus. And when you look at a security program, if you are not aligning your program to what drives revenue, I think you're making a mistake personally. That's my view. I think it's very important to be hyper-focused on what the customer's expectations are and what the risks are to your operations within your business, and tailor your focus based on that.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be talking about secure by design. And it's great to talk to somebody that's embraced this, especially in light of the guidance from CISA. What impact has this had on your company's approach to cybersecurity?
As I look back at Lexmark and our approach on the product side, I'm going to start with the product side because there's many avenues here we can explore. But as we look at the product side, we have had some form of a security process in our development life cycle for as long as I can remember, and I've been at Lexmark a very long time. But it wasn't formalized. And it was 2015 that we really started to formalize a policy and a process around security development lifecycle. And it was triggered by what I talked about before. It was triggered by customers and customer expectations. You think back to that 2015 timeframe and really go back a few years even before that, where you had large organizations, your Targets and your Home Depots and your Lowe's, right? They all got hit by major cyber attacks, and they all started to look at their third-party risk management. Target in particular, right, got hit through a third party, and that started the questions rolling in. That they were asking a lot of very in-depth questions around the security posture of our IT systems, but also of our products. And we looked at that and determined that, okay, it's time for us to start formalizing the process that we had in place. And we looked at a lot of the best practices. And at the time, Microsoft had one of the best books on this topic around their security development lifecycle. When we adopted that and tailored it for Lexmark to move that forward, and every company has its own cultures, its own uniqueness, and it's important that organizations who look at implementing something like this, that they understand how that fits in with their culture and their uniqueness. So for us, the big thing that it drove, and I would still argue to this day that the most impactful thing that it drives is awareness by everybody who plays a role in some form of development, whether it's product development, whether it's IT system development. Having that security foundation drives the conversations, and the conversations are what lead to a better product in the end. And so that has been a huge part of our efforts, is training, awareness, and doing that on a regular cadence.
As a security leader, safeguarding proprietary data isn't enough. You need a holistic strategy that extends to third parties and beyond. Between doing more with less, external pressures, and achieving digital transformation, effective third-party security feels unattainable. There's a better way. VisoTrust delivers fast and accurate third-party intelligence needed to make informed cyber risk decisions. With customers like Bain Capital, Bloomberg, and GM, VisoTrust automates third-party risk in minutes, providing deep insights for faster and efficient cybersecurity. With VisoTrust, you can automate cyber risk assessments with AI, identify and prioritize high-risk vulnerabilities, and continuously assess and monitor third parties. See how our AI-powered platform can improve your cybersecurity posture at CISOstoriespodcast.com/VisoTrust. I think learning from incidents is so important. It's interesting that was kind of an impetus for looking at things. When I wrote the CISO Compass book, I devoted a whole chapter to incidents is one of the systems that we should be looking at for how it's one of the tools to the CISO. We shouldn't have to repeat the target incident to learn from that. There's plenty of information out there about that happened, and it seems like so long ago now, but change is slow, right?
Yeah,
and
it is.
and looking at our third parties and we've been looking at this third party risk for some time, and so to look at how do we design things. So what sort of things did you have to do to make sure that your products are secure? What are some of those things that you put into your life cycle to make that happen?
Well, there's several different angles that we hit on there. When you first look at the pure development life cycle, we put in a multi-phased steps or gates in that. So it first started with training. We had mandatory 80 hours of training for every developer, and it was specific to their languages they were operating in and the platforms they were working on. We put in a new phase of threat analysis relative to new requirements for products. We put in a threat model assessment that needed to be performed on the architecture of any new capability we were adding. There were new tools that were added into the process for static code analysis, for web application vulnerabilities. Then we get into the test process. Oh, I'm sorry, I almost missed open source, right? Evaluating the open source that was included in the product and making sure that it was an active project and was being maintained, making sure that we were updating it appropriately, and keeping a good catalog of what open source was in the product. Then we get into the test process and building out a full security test focus, making sure that we had people with the right capability to do not just negative testing against a product, but really trying to dive deeper and exploit the systems in the product to see if they could gain access deeper into the product. And then finally, and this hits on a point that was made in the CISA paper, but it gets into the buy-in from leadership. We required through our policy for our senior managers and directors that are over the business areas that are releasing product or services, they have to review all the evidence that went into the security development lifecycle and make sure that the practice was performed, the process was performed, and before they sign off on release of a new product or a go live on a new product. So that was also another key part of that. The other side for protecting the product is on the IT system side. You look at the whole build infrastructure that's required to release a product. You look at the systems that are being used to, even for developers to communicate, or the build pipelines. It's extremely important to make sure that we are implementing best practices on those systems, the code repositories as well, on those systems, to make sure we have a hygienic, I'll call it a hygienic space, right, for the developers to operate in, so that they're not getting external introduction of problems into the system that obviously could create a bigger problem for us. So you can't just focus on the development lifecycle. It's got to be a holistic corporate look at the systems that lead into it and the process that sits on top of it.
Did you find that there was resistance from developers where this is going to take more time to do it this way, or it's adding more cost? How did you navigate that?
Yeah. So a couple things. The developers, absolutely. When you're going to go and throw 80 hours of training on top of developers, they're not super excited about that. We first led with senior management support for them taking the time to go do the training. And if I did not have the senior manager support, we would have had rebellions throughout various areas of the business. So that was first. But the second was making sure that we had a good training partner. No single organization is going to be able to come up with this training on their own. So finding a good training partner was critically important, because the curriculums that we put together, which I mentioned earlier, were specific to the languages and platforms they were working on. They, as the developers took them, and it took a few classes for them to get into it. But once they started getting into it, I had more than I would have expected come back and tell me, hey, you know what? That was actually valuable information I learned, and it was helpful, and I've applied it. I started applying it to what I do day to day. So that was once I had a few coming in and sharing that after taking the training, it spread, right? It becomes a grassroots type of buy-in at that point. And that was extremely important for us to move that forward.
So you're dealing with sensitive information in your products, your systems. How are you addressing that and protecting that sensitive information?
Many ways. First and foremost for us, it starts with good standards, good hardening standards that we evangelize throughout all areas of the business. We've had a lot of training around privacy regulation, data governance, that has been important for us to continue setting the tone, right? And that sets the high level expectation from a regulatory compliance and ultimately a customer expectation on how we're going to handle their data. Then it gets into what I described before, doing the threat analysis and architectural review on each of the systems that we're putting in place, reviewing the processes that are put into place to support the customer, and making sure that we have the right controls around those processes. So the controls around that are everything from the monitoring we can do on the data and where it's flowing, to email and what events are occurring in email. I mean, now I'm starting to get into just what CISOs would call best practices, right? Have you implemented the best practices? And we really hammer home on things like the CISA team, which I think is a great consolidated, easy way for the greater population to absorb. Here's the things we need to focus on, and continuing to evangelize those to help make the point of here's the things we need to do, and follow through on that through the architectural reviews and operational reviews and audits, et cetera.
Yeah, we've had Tony Sager from CIS speak on CISO Stories before. It's a great set of very nice infrastructure-oriented controls that I think are very useful for companies to employ as part of their program. So you're focusing on this end-to-end security. What are you doing to make sure that your suppliers are having this secure by design, principle throughout the life cycle?
Yeah, we've divided our suppliers up into multiple categories. You have the suppliers who don't really get access to data and have limited access to facilities or systems. And so they have just a higher level, easy, quick assessment of their security posture. Then we start to get into those suppliers who either have access to systems or then start to have access to data. And one of our first steps, and you can love it or hate it, but we rely on, first and foremost, either if that customer and the service they're offering has a SOC 2, we'll rely on that. We rely on SIG questionnaires. Many times we rely on security scoring services to augment all of that, right? For us to know, do we need to ask deeper questions in certain areas? And then in certain cases, we'll go and do audits of that vendor. And it just depends on the type of service that they're providing to us and the sensitivity of that service. So as an example, I personally have been to audit all of our contract manufacturers to look at the controls they have around the manufacturing of our products, all the way from the quality inspection of components coming into the loading dock, to the storage of those components, to the process to check out components and put it on the manufacturing line, to how they protect their IT systems, much like we would do with most of our IT vendors, but how the controls they have on their IT systems that support the production line. And then logistical side, right? Making sure we have the right logistics protections on the finished good. So it depends with each of them, the level we go to evaluate the risk associated with the vendor. And I think that's important for every organization to do, and invest your limited man hours that you're going to have on the ones that are the highest risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have also some certifications for your Secure by Design.
We do. So some of the standard ones, we have SOC 2 on our cloud services. We have ISO 27001 on our cloud services and on our data collection services that support our managed print services. We have ISO 2243 for our supply chain security. So as you look at those, we're trying to be holistic at looking at what we offer the customers, whether it's a finished good product or a service, and making sure that the certifications that we offer them demonstrate that we have a strong and ongoing practice to secure our products and services.
Mm-hmm. And you had some other ones too, I think, that you listed with validated by IDC.
Yep.
And a couple other firms.
They were. They were specific to product security, so hardware security. I'd call it hardware, printer, copier security. But yes, we have gone through a few additional firms to do an assessment on the products. One is a little older. We had UL do an assessment on our products as well at one point. But up to date, yes, IDC did a recent assessment.
Well, this has been great, Brian. What sort of advice would you give as final advice to emerging CISOs, current CISOs, new CISOs, experienced CISOs, as they're trying to implement Secure by Design principles in their organization and make sure that their entire supply chain is also secure?
Yeah, probably the most important thing is making sure that you are listening to your customers and your customer requirements. It goes back to what I said early. You are a service organization into your business. And as a service organization, you're there to support your business and the product or service that you're offering from that business. So stay aligned with that. That is probably the most important thing.
Well, thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, VisoTrust. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.